All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're tackling one of the biggest, most debated questions about ADHD. Where does it actually come from? Is it something you're born with, written in your genes, or is it something that happens to you? We're going to piece together all the clues, almost like a detective story, to see if we can find an answer.
And this question right here gets to the absolute heart of the mystery, doesn't it? It points to this really powerful and honestly super confusing link between surviving trauma and having symptoms that look an awful lot like ADHD. This is the knot we're going to try and untangle.
So, the big question, can trauma cause ADHD? You'd think the answer would be a straightforward yes or no, but it's not. Not even close. To really get what's going on, we have to look at the evidence like investigators, and that means we have to start with our single biggest clue. So, our investigation kicks off with genetics. This is the bedrock, the foundation for everything else, and it's where the science is the absolute strongest. Look, if we're going to do this right, we have to ground ourselves in what decades, literally decades of research have shown us time and time again. So let's just follow the data.
74%. Just let that number sink in. It's huge. What it means, based on massive studies of twins, is that nearly 3/4 of the reasons some people have ADHD and others don't comes down to genetics. That makes ADHD one of the most heritable psychiatric conditions out there. It's deeply biological.
But, and this is so important, we're not talking about a single ADHD gene. That's a myth. It doesn't exist. Instead, ADHD is what's called a polygenic disorder. Think of it like a giant symphony orchestra. It's not one violin playing a solo, it's hundreds, maybe thousands of different genes, each playing one tiny little note. Together, they create the music, the predisposition for the condition. Okay, so we've laid that strong genetic foundation. Now, let's bring our second piece of evidence back into the picture. Where exactly does trauma fit in? This quote from therapist Nakura Bryant just nails it. Trauma isn't seen as a primary cause, but it is a massive risk factor. You have to understand, during childhood, the brain is like a construction site on hyperspeed, and significant stress or trauma can literally change the architectural plans, altering the brain's structure in ways that produce symptoms that look exactly like ADHD. And get this, trauma tends to impact the very same brain regions that are already implicated in ADHD. We're talking about the prefrontal cortex, which is like the CEO of your brain, the amygdala, your emotional fire alarm, and the hippocampus, your memories filing system. When stress alters these key areas, the challenges that result can be almost impossible to tell apart from ADHD. Which brings us to our next clue. This incredibly confusing and clinically difficult overlap in symptoms. This is where things get really messy, and frankly, it's where misdiagnosis can happen all too easily. I mean, just look at this. Right there in the middle column, you see this cluster of shared symptoms: trouble concentrating, restlessness, emotional dysregulation, sleep problems. So, is a person struggling to focus because of their brain's innate wiring, or is it because their nervous system is stuck on high alert from past trauma? Without a really comprehensive evaluation, it is so hard to tell. Okay, let's add one more layer of complexity to our investigation, the environment. And this is where we have to be really sharp thinkers and question what the data is really telling us. So a recent study made some waves because it found a link between things like poor lighting or bad air quality in a home and how severe a child's ADHD symptoms were. And on the surface, that seems pretty straightforward, right? A bad environment seems to lead to worse symptoms. But hold on a second. This is where that detective work comes in. Is that really cause and effect? Or is it possible that something else is going on? What if we're looking at all the clues from the wrong direction? And this quote from an online discussion about that study offers a brilliant alternative theory. This is the classic correlation versus causation trap. We already know ADHD is highly genetic, right? So, could it be that parents with ADHD are more likely to have kids with ADHD and are also maybe more likely to struggle with executive function tasks, like, say, changing a broken light bulb? In that case, the environment isn't causing the ADHD. The family's ADHD might be shaping the environment. It totally flips the script. Okay, we have looked at the genetics, the role of trauma, that confusing symptom overlap, and the environmental red herrings. It's finally time. Let's put all these pieces together and deliver the final verdict of our investigation. So here it is, the conclusion in 3 key parts. First,
The evidence is overwhelming that ADHD is primarily genetic. That 74% heritability number is our starting point. Second, trauma is a powerful influence. It can reshape the brain and either create symptoms that mimic ADHD, or it can take an existing genetic predisposition and turn the volume way up. And third, and this is the big one, complexity is absolutely key. It is not an either-or situation. A proper, accurate diagnosis has to look at all of it together: the genes, the life story, and the environment.
And that is the final takeaway here. Why does all of this matter so much? Because when we really understand this complexity, when we get that ADHD isn't just one thing, we can get better diagnoses, find more effective treatments, and most importantly of all, we can offer more compassionate support. It's about honoring a person's entire story, both their biology and their biography. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.